We'll wait just a minute or two longer, let folks continue to join.
Zoom in my profile.
Eric, I don't see Dan,
Ours are
so
the local government centers.
I think we just kick it off. I don't see Dan, so.
I think that's because this is our hosting, right?
Yeah,
No,
Dan's not here this week.
Oh, excellent then. We'll be your pretend host today. Thanks everybody for joining us. My clock says 12:02, so we'll get started. We have a list, this, at least in the beginning part, it's going to be all legislative updates. We have a list of bills that we'll go through and talk about, which we circulated approximately 17 minutes before this meeting started. So Chantal, when I look at the list, I think your House Bill 50 is the first one on it. You're on mute.
Thanks. House Bill 50 is the 911 bill that we talked a little bit about previously. It's being carried by Representative Garner. What it does is it takes $450,000 a year off the top of the 911 fund and moves it over to the state library to do some GIS work. They'll do the annual assessments, GIS assessments, and they're getting 1.5 FTEs to help counties with their GIS and consulting. So that's that bill. It's currently stuck in the Energy and Telecommunications Committee. It's supposed to be amended. I don't know what the amendment is going to look like. I have heard that it's to take the money from just one account, and it's coming from skis. And during the committee meeting, he had discussed taking it from the grant account fully. So that's where that is. I've been in contact with him about that bill to talk about shortening the sunset on it from 10 years to 6 to now. I would like it to be 2. I think that would just, I'd like it to be tested and asked for every session, just because we need to know if this is going to work, if they're going to take 911 funds. And that's where that bill is right now. Any questions?
Let's take questions as the bills come. Anybody have any questions or concerns about that one? And you can always ask again at the end. I have HB 107. No, I don't. You have another one. Senate Bill 14.
Which
Tribal
one is that? I can't find
Tribal
it.
participation.
Okay, another 911 bill. So this is just to allow the tribes to access the grant funds, the 911 grant funds. They were inadvertently left out, and this is just a cleanup bill to fix that. So far, it's just swimming along.
Any questions about that one? Jason, did I do House Bill 107, revised mill levy election laws?
You were supposed to. I did it because you couldn't get in. You talk about it though.
No, tell us about it.
No, you tell us about your half and I'll tell you about my half.
Well, what I remembered is that we wanted it dead, and it was I can't remember.
It adds the increments to the ballot language. So you have to add every $100,000 increment to the ballot language, which increases it and costs more money for the counties. And then what was the part? There was another part that we hated for MACo. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, I'm pulling up the bill.
Good idea.
I think it's the one that made it 2/3 majority, didn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
There it is. So MACo opposed the 2/3 majority part because you would never get a mill levy passed ever again.
I did that one. At least I
No,
participated in
you
that
tried. You got kicked out.
That one so far is tabled in committee. I was there for the hearing. I tried to testify, but since I registered 10 hours instead of 12 hours in advance, I couldn't participate.
So
Don't worry, we got it.
for those of you commissioners, clerks, anybody who's interested in testifying remotely, they are serious about that 24-hour sign up time. If you miss it by an hour, you don't get to talk. So if you're going to sign up to testify on a bill, you have up until 24 hours prior to or till noon the day before to sign up online. So that's something that we sort of struggled with because we're used to sort of making our list of things to do that morning, and we're having to do that a day ahead. And Eric got bit by it.
I can testify that also because I missed the TCEP hearing yesterday. Was it yesterday? Wednesday. For that very reason.
I got bit by it with a 911 bill, but they let me in. I begged. It all worked out.
Well, I appreciate everybody's honesty, and I'm glad I'm in good company, Commissioner Hart. I'm a little disappointed that Chantel can smile and get into a committee where I get kicked out of.
There's a reason we have her lobbying.
Commissioner Briggs, you're exactly right. Anyway, that bill for a lot of reasons died in committee, particularly because the committee understands what we made a point to say in that bill was that you can't have a minority of folks overruling the vast majority. And I think Chantel, I made you tell them that it was 64% of the people shouldn't be able to 34% of the people shouldn't be able to overwhelm. And that's exactly what the bill is. The sponsor said what you expect him to say, that they were just sick of, by a slim majority, a lot of voted levies going through. So we hope that stays dead. House Bill 127, there's been a lot of discussion about this, especially among your treasurers. The proposal was essentially, the bill's called Revising Property Tax Payment Procedure. And the sponsor wanted to find a way to allow for partial collections of taxes to happen. So instead of the requirement that if you become delinquent that you have to pay the full year's current and then full years of taxes in arrears, to allow payments to be made in taxes. And we had suggested early on some larger gaps or larger payments to be made, and so it doesn't turn your collections or your treasurer's office into a collection agency, and those sort of fell on deaf ears. There are members of ours that supported the bill as drafted, and there are members of ours that opposed it, and our executive committee asked us to work with the sponsor, and if we couldn't get concessions for larger payments to oppose it. That's exactly what we did, respectfully. I'll tell you as membership, this is a brand new legislator, and this was an important bill to her. So I'm going to reach out to her this afternoon after I get confirmation that it was tabled in committee and has effectively died. And I will pledge to work with her over the interim to try and come up with something that allows for partial payments of back taxes, because I think her premise is good, and our executive committee agreed that her premise was good, but the mechanics in the bill needed some work. And I hope that she takes us up on that offer and that we can help her come with something that's more workable and practical in the future. Any questions on House Bill 127?
So Eric, you did say that is dead, do you think?
It died in committee this morning. I wasn't there to confirm it. I talked to the chair of the committee this morning, who told me she was going to kill it in committee and that she would encourage us all to work over the biennium. So I take the chair's word, but I wasn't there to watch it.
Yeah, I didn't see it either, but I know I wrote Rhonda about, that 10%, it's kind of like a credit card minimum payment. It screws a lot of things up, and our software can't handle it either.
So Commissioner Oakers, one of the concerns that we raised with the sponsor and with the committee is that it never became clear to me as she drafted that bill what it ever meant to be delinquent. Because if you had set up a payment plan and just paid 10% of what was outstanding, or $10, which was your two option, and it was the greater of the two, you could have a fairly insignificant tax bill last for a long time. And I believe it was her intent to keep you out of the assignment and tax deed process by making minimum payments. And we'll help her with that. But in essence, what we suggested is that it needs to be a larger sum. You should be able to pay, if you're current with your taxes and you fell in arrears for previous years, pay half the years. Pay what the tax bill showed when you break it out into two different sections. Things like that would not convert your treasurers into recalculating penalties and interest based on very nominal payments. That was essentially our testimony. And Commissioner, thank you for reaching out. Representative Knudsen was the one that was on the fence, because the bill in theory is a bill that we could support, finding a reasonable way to allow for a collection of back taxes.
That's good. Work on it. And 2 years from now, maybe come up with something.
That's our plan. Any additional questions on House Bill 127? We will jump to Senate Bill 73 from Senator Regier. Jason, did you do this?
I did.
Why don't you talk?
Okay, so in essence, what it does is it diverts the 4% of the lodging sales tax that we all pay when we stay in motels across Montana from the general fund where it goes now. And this is the majority of it, from the general fund where it goes now to local governments to offset property tax. So right now the split is it would go 75% to local governments, 25% goes to pay for the Heritage Center and a couple other things. But of that 75%, 2/3 of what you receive has to be allocated to property tax relief. 1/3 is so that is usable for you as a county or local government, basically any way you choose. We testified in support of this bill. Really couldn't see a downside. They have a trigger mechanism built in for fluctuation of collection. So if sales tax on lodging goes down, you can then recapture your mills and not lose any revenue. If it goes up, you offset that much more. So there really wasn't a downside for us. It allows you some flexibility, but with that fail safe in it, we decided to support. And this is not the 4% that goes to commerce for tourism, which is what we thought.
Still not sure that that's the case, but I believe Jason.
Well, you and I are the only ones that anyway, commerce said there's no impact on them, which shocked us. And so that statute is really hard to trace. But I would imagine that if it was taking it away, the budget office would know. So I'm going to defer to their expertise and say I was wrong. It's about 36 million, between 30 and 36 million in the first biennium anticipated collections. So questions on 73, Regier?
So how does that work? Do we reduce the maximum amount that we can levy the following year? so that it actually is tax relief? I mean, how does the mechanism on the back end work?
So we would have to add a calculation in the mill levy calculation spreadsheet that backed out that dollar amount, and then you calculate your levies.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not even overly complex.
It really was hard. We sort of wanted, our instincts were to argue about it, but in the end, it's like there's nothing wrong with this. So,
And it even provided for a leveling out. So if you had a significant decrease year over year on those revenues that were collected from the previous year, you could adjust your levy to hit your revenue from the previous year, just like now. He put a lot of thought into it. Somebody put a lot of thought into it.
yeah, the fear with sales tax is the fluctuation, right? It ebbs and flows, and so that fail safe that's built in took that away. The only thing that I could come up with that was a negative was if you start to see fluctuations in your lodging tax amounts and they're significant, you're going to see bumps and rises and falls in your property tax, which people don't like. So you might have a little bit of headache with that, but still, I think that will be fairly insignificant in most areas. And the other thing it built in was they have several they have quite a lot of collections that they don't have assigned to a particular county, and those will be distributed to all of the counties. And so those like Golden Valley that don't actually have very much collections still get some money. So it sort of spread it out a little bit too for those collections that they can't automatically or find the location of where they should assign it.
Jason, do we know when they're going to do executive action on that bill?
I do not know. I think they probably will sit on it for a bit, given all the other property tax sort of things that are coming.
Jason, this is Jerry. Can I ask a question? You mentioned Muscle Shell, Golden Valley. So we got 2 hotels in Jordan. Is that the only money we're going to get is whoever stays in Jordan?
So for sure, that's the only money you get. But of the dollars that they collect that they don't have a location identified for, you'll get a piece of that. So you'll get some money that probably was not collected in Garfield County that will go to you. So it'll be more than that. But I mean, yeah, the smaller counties that that don't have lodging are not going to get a lot. But I think there was about $5 million that was going to get divvied out, divided by 56. So, we're talking, a little bit of money.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, you'll have a chance at the end again. House Bill 121 require elected officials approval of local health board and officer actions. I hope this generates a healthy discussion among our membership. This is a bill, probably of the health bills. Well, I'll be careful how I say this. This is a bill that has a little bit for everybody to hate, but this is likely the bill that we're going to get behind to try and kill all the rest of the public health authority bills and ride this one through if at all possible. It is, of the ones and the drafts that we've seen so far, it takes the most reasonable approach to looking at restrictions on health officer directives and Board of Health orders. And in essence, from a 10,000 foot level, what it does is it says if the Board of Health, in normal scope and duty of their job, wants to promulgate rules or regulations, again, this is outside of a pandemic, but they want to make rules or regulations under the authority that they currently have to do that, they finish their work and submit it to the governing body for review and approval. The sponsor, Representative Beatty out of Ravalli County, is adamant that he thinks, even outside of a pandemic, that boards of health should not have the level of autonomy and promulgation of rules that they've had historically in Title 50. Think of it in terms of your planning boards that do the yeoman's job in analyzing things from growth policy to subdivision regulations, but when they finish their work, they submit it to you for final review and approval. That's the model that he's looking at this under. Additionally, he put provisions in the bill that say that under the authorities that the health officer has and the Board of Health has in terms of communicable disease control in the middle of, say, a COVID-19 pandemic, their directives and orders are subject to review by the governing body. And that doesn't mean that you're compelled to review their orders. It doesn't mean that you have to get a chance to review them before they're issued. It doesn't mean that you are required to do anything if you decide to just stay out of it. But if in the case at hand, a Board of Health decides to enforce something like a business closure, modification of work hours, or a mask enforcement, they have that authority to do it, and they still do under BD's bill. You, as a governing body, would have the ability to review that once it was implemented through a process that he created in this bill. That doesn't exist in current law. So, as you know, boards of health have that authority, and health officers have a limited authority to act immediately in the cases of pandemic or exposure or mitigation or quarantine. This would provide a provision that says that the governing body can insert themselves in that process should they choose to. It also redefines governing body in that it recognizes there are multi-jurisdictional boards of health, and in some cases districts boards of health that encompass more than one county. And he was gracious enough to include revisions to his draft that reflected in essence local control. For example, a city county board of health by interlocal agreement could specify what that review would look like and who the defined governing body is. It was really important from our side to say in those multi-jurisdictional boards, there needed to be a process where if something needed to change, let's take, for example, a Board of Health's authority to issue early closures to businesses. They still have that authority, but if it was subject to review, it couldn't be subject to review by the city and the county, because if they didn't agree, nothing would happen. Same thing with the promulgation of rules. If the Board of Health did their work and forwarded a rules package off to the city and the county, and it required consent from both, nothing would happen. So it allows for interlocal agreements to spell out what that review would look like for multi-jurisdictional or district-wide boards of health. I pushed on Representative Beatty pretty hard before he introduced the bill to back off on the rule process and limit it to promulgation of rules related to pandemics or outbreaks or communicable disease. And he is not and was not willing to budge on that. And it had nothing to do in my mind with the pandemic. He's following this philosophy that there needs to be greater accountability for the elected officials that create these sorts of boards, that these sorts of boards need to be, for all intents and purposes, advisory. And when they're vested with additional authorities, they need to come before elected bodies. That's the gist of his bill. We can go into details if you want, but I want to talk the politics of it for a second too. There are bills right on its heels. Two have been introduced so far that are much less technical changes to Board of Health authority. They are taking chunks and whacks at Board of Health authority. As I testified in support of this bill, it is still my opinion from what I've seen so far, this is by far the most reasonable approach to, if there needs to be a retraction on public health authority, this is the most reasonable approach that's out there. It got overwhelming opposition testimony from the health folks from across the state, from all the associations and the health folks across the state. And we are working as quietly as we can behind the scenes to encourage those folks to either soften their opposition or flip around to support now that they've seen what the next round of bills that are coming out look like. This will be a tightrope all the way through the session. I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. I think if this bill, HB 121, dies, there will still be public health restricted authority bills that make it through. And they'll be much, in my opinion, they'll be much worse than this bill for a variety of different reasons. I know our 56 counties are not going to agree with the position that MACo's taken on this bill. The legislature, if anything gets through, will not be unanimous in their support for changes in the Board of Health authorities. But with that being said, this is the bill that we're writing, and it will be our goal from this point forward to kill every other one of the Board of Health authority bills out there, as long as this one's still a venue for us to pursue. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Eric, did you talk about the hiring authority on it?
Oh, another kind of, I always consider this to be a technical fix, but you folks out there, whether you're participating on boards of health or not, recognize that the ultimate hiring authority for a health officer has always rested with the Board of County Commissioners. You might have deferred in the recruitment and selection process. You might have even deferred to a certain extent on what payment for the health officer would look like. The statute was, I think, a little ambiguous in that it gives boards of health the authority to hire and compensate a health officer. That's been removed, and it's reverted back to what common practice is now, where the Board of Health can recommend, and the Board of County Commissioners will make the final hiring determination and set the compensation. When we talk to our membership, that's essentially the practice that's out there, because the Board of County Commissioners, even in those multi-jurisdictional districts or city county boards of health, ultimately control the purse strings and oftentimes have adopted salary schedules and are the final negotiator of what that pay and benefits package looks like. It, to me, doesn't change anything, but it's a technical fix. And frankly, I consider that to be a improvement.
That's interesting, Eric. This is Diane McLean in Hill County. At our Board of Health meeting this past recent week, I asked for our health officer position to be on the agenda, and I got tremendous pushback from the person who was appointed after our physician's assistant resigned the 1st of October. And that person who was appointed at that time at a Board of Health meeting, not with, and of course, all of us commissioners sit on that Board of Health meeting, but it was not did not also go to our county commissioner agenda meeting. That person is our health director, who, in my humble opinion, is not qualified to fulfill that health officer role. I would like to know where that statute is that declares that it is the final authority lies with the county commissioners, not just the health board. And also, in that situation, is there actually a term limit, or would that be up to each individual county on that health officer?
Commissioner, those are all great questions. And if I had a really clear answer, I'd give it to you, but let's take the easiest one of them first. And you need to tell me, when the Board of Health appointed the health officer, is it under contract? Is it a term? Is there anything related to their employment status?
I'll tell you that it is my recollection. I'm not having very good success finding it in minutes and even in my own notes, but it is my recollection that that was oh my gosh, we're in the middle of the spikes. We need somebody in the position. So for the interim, for just a temporary situation, we're going to put this health director into our health officer position. And of course, we've had a change in commissioners, but a second commissioner remembers that as well. We're not finding that well documented, that opinion, and we did not establish a term at that time. So there's some ongoing discussion, and it's not always pleasant, with whether or not that was in fact our intent or not. It would seem to me that anyone that the commission has the ability to appoint actually serves at the request of the commission, that they would be able to change that if they so choose.
It would be ideal. I think in your situation, we can talk offline, but in your situation, it probably would be better even now to offer a contract so you can specify some of those terms. The provisions in Title 50 say the Board of Health appoints the health officer and sets the compensation. I respond by saying they can't sign contracts and they don't have the purse strings. Only the Board of County Commissioners can authorize the FTE, and only the Board of County Commissioners can enter into contracts unless they delegate that specific authority to one of their departments. There are folks on the call right now that have health officers by contract that commissioners have signed, that boards of health have signed. They have sometimes durational terms, sometimes not durational terms. It is all over the board. Okay. Some of our larger counties, I think this is indisputable about where the health officer gets their authority from and who hires them and who pays them. But this bill helps clear that up. I should probably not think of it as just an administrative fix because I know that there are different situations all over. I will send you the references to the current citations in Title 50, Commissioner McLean, but they're not going to help you because it makes it
Okay.
seem really clear that the Board of Health hires, appoints, and sets the compensation for.
Okay, and I have read that particular statute, and so that's why I was very interested in your comment that really and truly that final authority rests with the commissioners. And our health officers serve for a minimal stipend of $100 a month. It is not an expensive amount, but you know.
That should be a contract so you can specify exactly those kinds of things, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, well, Eric, while this is a technical issue, it's a huge issue because every time we go through a change of health officer, we have exactly this same fight with the Board of Health on who really has the hiring authority and who gets to set salaries, not only for the Board of Health, but the statute also says and staff.
It does.
Now we have collective bargaining agreements that are supposed to precede, override anything the Board of Health says. But like I said, despite the fact that they can't contract or anything else, and the health officer is an employee of the county, we go through this fight every time. So this is a kind of a big fix to me. It's one of the many things I love about this bill.
Thank you for that. I promise you, I'll try and stop calling it a technical fix.
Yeah, Commissioner.
So
Briggs,
Eric, you said that
love it.
a rules review, this thing makes a rules package or something like that go to the commissioners have the right to review it. Do they also have the right to veto?
Yeah, the way that I would interpret the way the bill draft is written is that you can send it back to them for more work. I think you could reject it out hand. You could suggest edits to send it back to them. You could vote it down. You could approve it, and I think, frankly, you could modify it if you wanted. Think of your planning boards that present you a package that you have the ability to amend, send back to them for more work, reject.
Commissioner Briggs, I anticipate executive action on this bill next week.
Okay.
I think you have three representatives on that local government committee. If you have relationships with any of them, will you? I don't want them to get tied around the axle with the other things that are coming. I'd like to see that one move out of committee.
Yeah, I would too. I'll reach out to them because, like I said, I don't have really any trepidations about this bill, given the things the sponsor has already changed at our request. I totally concur with the notion that regulations need to be approved by elected officials, not an unelected body. And I just got more fuel added to the fire this week when I received a legal opinion that says even though we have never reviewed 3 of the members on the Board of Health, that they are automatically appointed, and we have nothing to say about that either. So I need this situation fixed.
I think I've got the votes to get it out, but you would be helpful.
I will handle that.
Thank you.
So just one more piece of talk about fuel to the fire. I do want to have a generic conversation about this not being the ideal time in the middle of a pandemic to start a legislative session addressing Board of Health Authority. I wish we had the ability to have this discussion outside of the pandemic, but we don't. And frankly, the provisions in Title 50 have been around since the last pandemic in 1918, and even before then, with the notion that you didn't want your public health decisions and your quarantine decisions somehow tainted by political ideology. That has always been the theory about why you had a separation between public health and public health authority, and oftentimes a separate entirely health officer that could make these kinds of decisions when it's with communicable diseases and quarantine. That's why Title 50 is the way Title 50 was, with a lot of autonomy. I just think, frankly, that in the environment that we're in right now, that's not going to stay the same. It will change, and this is the vehicle that we've chosen to ride as the most reasonable of the responses to an overwhelming majority opinion that autonomy can't last.
Well, you're exactly right, Eric, but some of us tried to get this fixed many times over the last 16 years. and could never get any traction with anybody because they all looked at us like we were from Mars, that any health officer would ever do anything like is being done right now.
Understood.
Eric, if I could make comment, thank you for your work on this and working with the sponsor, and thanks for the rest of the staff that's worked on it. And I think it's better than it was, and probably from a practical perspective, maybe the best we're going to get, like you've been describing. But I would disagree a little bit with Joe in that, and your description of Title 50 that you just made. I think it's that way for a reason, so that elected people in a political position are not making health decisions, especially in the time of a pandemic when, you know, there is real public risk out there, and someone with that kind of expertise should be making those decisions. That's why that's why the law was written that way, so that we don't step in and get in the way of health-related decisions and make them political decisions, or based on, I might make a decision based on my next election or what my particular leaning is, and that's what it's trying to avoid. And so I appreciate that part of the bill, but I recognize what you're saying is whether we like that or not, it's going to change. And so we do need to make it the best we can. And I appreciate the work you're doing toward some sort of more practical approach. Though my personal opinion is we have no business making health decisions for our community. They should be based on science and the people that know those decisions and or know those have the expertise in those areas. And that's why it was designed that way, and to keep politics out of a public health decision and a public health crisis. And that's exactly how it should be. I have no business making those decisions, and most of us, unless you have a medical background, probably shouldn't be making those decisions either. So being a partner with the Board of Health, as is being described, and trying to make those decisions together, or at least giving feedback, I think that's okay. But I would hate to see a bunch of vetoes of common sense, CDC backed kinds of recommendations in our communities, and then county commissioners deny those because we don't like it or we don't believe in it or whatever. I hope that doesn't happen, but it really opens the door to some of that is nonsense from my perspective, and should be based on really the public health crisis and responding to that, as Title 50 does now. But I think I appreciate the work you're doing, Eric, anyway, and I just had to get my voice on the record, so thank you.
Commissioner, I think you did a good job of articulating the tightrope that we're going to be on here. There's going to be this is one of those bills that'll be a little bit for everybody to hate, and we'll see what happens with it.
And so, Eric, do you see in the chat the question about the bill giving more detail to who can act as a health officer? There are, the first qualification is that it is a physician or a qualified medical. The second is that it's a person with a master's in health. But then the third provision in that statute, and I can't quote it, but it kind of opens it up to, as determined by the department. And I'm kind of like, so who's the department that references? And this is a very legitimate question, and one that we will fuss with in our going forward in our county with this health officer question. I appreciate, Andy, what you have said, Commissioner Hunthausen. I am also a commissioner who sits with very little medical background or expertise. And I do hope that we can have sound medical advice from those in that field. That being said, there is quite a division in what's recognized as sound health decisions.
Commissioner, we did not amend the 3 criteria, but what is being changed is clarifying that the commissioners in the end make the hiring decision. So that would make you the department, would be my understanding.
I'm not sure on that, Jason. The credentialing comes out of DPHHS.
Oh, okay.
because our current health officer, we had to go get a waiver that because her credentials were not an exact match for the state law. And we had to petition DPHHS that Trish's credentials were adequate. And my read is that the change in the law won't change that. It just makes clear that the ultimate hiring and firing is up to the commission.
Okay, so you're probably right. So the department as described in 3 would be the DPHHS. And 52-116.
Yes, and just to be clear, this bill does not amend that. The provisions that it's a licensed physician or a master in public health or other criteria as evaluated by the department still remains.
I guess I'd like to comment on that. Commissioner Hunthausen, his comment. I think this bill would help Board of Health officers going a little rogue and going above and beyond the governor's directives. We did have that case here in Webull County, and it created quite a problem for a while. So something that a guy could have a little community organization and come together on making some of these directives would make it go a lot smoother instead of these directives from your health officer and bam, we got lockdowns ahead of what the state was and mandating. So that created a huge problem here in Webull County. So it would smooth that over a little bit and help keep the peace. Let's just put it that way.
For fun, can't remember off the top of my head. There's a comparison bill that you can look at just to give you a sense of what's coming. Senator Kerry's got a bill that takes a much larger whack at public health authority. And I'm not saying that because I think it's a bad bill or Senator Kerry's a bad person. It's just that it's a different perspective on how to reorganize and limit the control of health officers and boards of health. It's a great comparison, just I think to make a point that this is a reasonable approach. I'm going to move on. We can still, again, ask questions at the very end. Senate Bill 77, revised special district financing and dissolution provisions. This is an interesting bill. This is aimed primarily, well, the bill as proposed includes only special districts organized under the title or sub 10 that are jurisdiction wide. The bill sponsor wants to go after incorporated cities and towns that create special districts and shift the burden for special district funding from the general fund, i.e. parks districts. It was very clear in his presentation that was what he was going for.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish what you were going to say there, Eric, and then I'll ask my question.
His goal was to make it, I think, just much more difficult in creating the special districts for general fund purposes. And the way that he wanted to do that was to have a regular review of the creation of special districts. So he put a provision in that doesn't sunset. It essentially kills special districts in 10-year increments. He amended the protest provisions in there to make it a little bit easier for protest, and then limited 2 different ways to calculate and prescribe the way assessments could go in the future after the vote to create them or the petition was unsuccessful in getting rid of the districts. And it limits, according to him, the assessment increases to a rate of inflation as referenced in 1510-420, not the half rate of inflation that 1510-420 says. His goal is to limit it to a full inflationary factor. So as a taxpayer or as an assessment payer on a go-forward basis, you would know what that limitation was in increases in assessments. We supported this bill, but we supported it in testimony in the committee. And then we also encouraged him to address some of the concerns that were brought by a private bond counsel. There were some concerns about the dissolution provisions weren't protective enough of a special district that might have had some bonded indebtedness. And the bond counsel that provided opponent testimony indicated that he wouldn't be able to sell bonds for special districts with those provisions that had automatic sunsets in them. The sponsor is more than willing to address those and has made some additional modifications, or at least is entertaining additional amendments based on concerns from the League of Cities and Towns. But we supported this with a 10-year sunset and a much clearer spelled out dissolution process, which I think is a good transition to Commissioner McCormick's question.
You know the question. Thank you very much, Rick. good explanation, and it pretty much cuts to the chase. And with LC 2485, dissolution of improvement districts.
Yeah.
And Senator Gauthier is working with you all and MACo on that particular bill, and that's one that Lewis and Clark County brought forward. Your comments regarding Senate Bill 77, if that could be or would be incorporated, or should LC 2485 stand on its own and be drafted for a specific bill?
LC, in my humble opinion, Commissioner, LC 2485 ought to stand on its own and continue forward. If we have to get some coordination, if both of these pass, we can do that. I'm still a little concerned that this one, that 77 won't make it all the way through, and you need your fix, and your fix is very specific for those weirdly converted road improvement districts that look like special districts. And so I'm saying, let's run them. If we can coordinate them at the end, we'll do that, but yours should stand alone.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Yeah. This one had I call it a companion bill. It is a companion bill. They were done hand in hand from two different Senate districts from two different neighbors. Senate Bill 78 next in order, as you can imagine, because they were given at the same time. Senate Bill 78 eliminates one of the methods of assessment that's allowed. And the method of assessment is the proportion of the appraised value of the property as compared to the taxable value of the district. It's an assessment method that's not used that often. We had an interesting conversation among our executive committee about why MACo supported this. Normally we would oppose because it's a limitation on local government authority and it's a tool that's in the toolbox, and for all those good reasons. This was looked at in light of other likely property tax bills that are out there and still more coming, in order for us to not look like we're just objecting to everything that might have a negative impact on the property tax base. Also, as I said, this isn't used very often, and we did agree and negotiated with the sponsor that this had no impact on any existing districts that use this method of assessment. In fact, we added some applicability language he proposed to the committee to place on the bill in executive action, just to make sure if any districts out there that's using this method of assessment, this bill does not impact it. Going forward, that method of assessment would not be available if you were creating new districts.
And I'm hearing it's dead. So
both of them or just this one?
Just this one.
Okay.
Eric, a question if I could from Jefferson County.
Yes, sir.
One of the county commissioners contacted me yesterday. I don't think any of them are on the call today, but they have concerns about Senate Bill 77, particularly with having to reconstitute such as solid waste districts every 10 years and going through the process for putting that out to the members of the special district. And so they wanted me to express their concern about that. And then a second question came from the county attorney, and it had to do with retroactive. Would this bill apply retroactively, or would currently constituted special districts be allowed to continue? And this bill only apply to newly created special districts? Thanks.
On the second question first, because there's not a specific applicability provision added to the bill, and I don't believe that League of Cities and Towns is talking about adding that kind of catch-all for existing districts. And thirdly, because the sponsor wants all these districts to be reviewed in 10 years, I think it would affect all special districts caught under this on the 10-year review. It's in a separate section on the dissolution portion of it, so I think that that's their intent. On the first question, especially in terms of solid waste, that's part of the issue with private bond counsel and the indebtedness question. I think hypothetically, if you're running a solid waste district that has no debt, you would be subject to the renewal provisions as they were proposed. And I believe the city's trying to get the sponsor to address the language that doesn't say that it is dead and then has to be rebuilt, rather that it could continue with a vote. And I think that's more of a technical change based on the drafter's bad language to say it disappears and then you reconstitute it versus a vote to allow it to continue. But to your point, it's a concern. If you don't have any debt and you are in 10 years comes by, the voters will need to weigh in on renewing that special purpose district if it falls under that category of special purpose districts, which not all of them do. This is the time where Chantel usually puts in the chat all the list of districts that don't fall under this, this provision.
I'll get on that.
Look it up.
Jason, I remember having a discussion about 78 dying. 77 is still in negotiation with amendments, correct?
Yeah, he's talking with Kelly, and I don't know if they're going to get there, but they're still talking. So it's still got a heartbeat.
All right.
But I'm not hearing anything positive on the other one, on Carrie's.
Okay. I will move on to House Bill 59. It's revised funding provisions for the public employees retirement system. This is a agency bill sponsored by Representative Hamilton. Those of you that have been around for a while know that we have in the past, MACo was participant discussions about the pension system that had a slow increase on employer contributions to the public employees retirement system until it amortized or was actuarially sound with a 30-year amortization schedule. And that is currently built in statute that if we still don't amortize in 30 years, there's an incremental increase. This bill just jumps it to the very end, and the applicability date I think would be next July. I bring this up not because we testified in opposition to it, but because MACo's involved with the study bill from Representative Garner to do a deep dive into the pension system over the next biennium. The pension study bill is what we're going to support, and in exchange, we're going to try to kill all the rest of the pension bills that are out there. It doesn't make sense that we do marginal fixes and incremental rate increases and everything else that will likely be proposed through all the different pension systems if we're going to do a deep dive on looking at what is the issue with the pension systems over the next biennium. My goal is to not have to address these each time at the podium and kill them, because I want to acknowledge that if there's a fix, it's just going to take time for us to do it. So we'll support in public the study bill. And if there are questions asked of us of any of the other pension bills, we will recommend that they all be tabled.
Kill them all except the study bill is the approach.
SB 51, Senate Bill 51 is exempting certain fiber optic coaxial cable from property taxation. This is new and expanding industry abatement styled abatement, but this is no local government authority to approve style abatement. So those of you that have gone through new and expanding business tax abatement request, you'll get an application from a new or expanding business. You'll hold a hearing within a prescribed period of time. If it crosses multiple jurisdictions, i.e. a city or a county, you oftentimes hold joint hearings so you can get the same information. You get an assessment of what the taxable value is that they're going to expand by and what the reduction in property tax collections would be based on that new taxable value over a period of time. And then you get to make some decisions about whether you'll authorize it, approve it, and to a certain extent what that phase in would look like. This bill doesn't do any of the local government review portion of it, and it allows an eligible coaxial or fiber optic developer to invest the abatement in subsequent installation that would be eligible for subsequent abatement. We had been working with the sponsor, Senator Ellsworth, over the interim to try and include the regular and routine local government review and approval provisions. Unsuccessfully, I was not able to convince him that local government review would be applicable in this case. Instead, he has a bill draft amendment that would allow for the local government to be put on notice and provide comment. I don't know that I consider that a win, but I don't consider that a loss. This is a flagship of the new governor's administration. This is a bill carried by leadership in the Republican Senate on behalf of the governor, and we weren't going to change this, but what we were able to leverage at least was the notification and opportunity to comment. So you'll be able to tell in your jurisdictions where new fiber is going to be installed and provide comment on that fiber. And then as of important, it looks like the budget office and maybe the Department of Revenue is going to put some clawback provisions on this that allow local governments the ability to initiate examination of whether clawback would be necessary. It's still a little ambiguous, and I want to see the actual draft language before we can report out in total. But in essence, if a company who made the investment in a subsequent year claimed the abatement didn't do what the abatement was supposed to do, that is reinvest in future fiber, or something significant happened that changed the assessed values, or I think lied about the amount that they put in and thus the tax values, local governments could claw back from them the tax exemption. And so the notice is really important if there's a 2-year duration from when you could claw back and a 10-year duration on when they get their tax abatement. Notice is even more important given those clawback provisions. But it's Commissioner Briggs referenced something in a previous conversation between he and I as a runaway train. This is a runaway train.
Eric, I think we should do the prepaid 911 for Chantel and then probably take some questions on any other bills we haven't talked about.
Let's do what Jason just said with Chantel.
Prepaid 911, Senate Bill 81 by Senator Regier. This is not a new bill. It came in 2013. It passed both houses, made it to the governor's desk, and was vetoed. What it would do is tax prepaid wireless cards, phones. Right now, they don't pay anything for the 911 service. So all wireline and other wireless devices do. We're all paying it. But if you buy a prepaid card, you're not providing your $1 to the 911 fund. So this bill kind of, it makes it so that they pay 95 cents. So it's a lower cost, but that's okay. At least it's more than nothing. The original bill was taking 5 cents off the original dollar, which I thought is kind of weird. It's that the 25-75 split that directs, 75% to your quarterly distribution and 25 cents to that grant fund. That was lowered from $1 to 95 cents. So I contacted Senator Regier and gave him the numbers of how that would impact the account if prepaid wireless cell phone usage continues to decrease with time. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it has gone down over the years. So I was worried. And it's a pretty significant hit of like $1 million. So he's bringing an amendment in executive action to get rid of that 5 cent decrease and put back in the dollar. So it'll just be additional revenue now in the 911 fund, which is great because who doesn't like additional revenue? The reason he put it in there to begin with was because he thought it was a neat way to sell the bill as a decrease in taxes and an increase in revenue. But he had no intention of taking money away from the locals and the grant fund. So that's that bill. And I also need to talk about Senate Bill 92. It's on Monday. It disallows the appointment of county election administrators. There are currently 8 counties that have appointed election administrators and 2 considering it. MACo is going to go in and oppose it based on the taking away of local control. Counties should have the ability to appoint an election administrator if they see fit, if it fits their county. We have opposition lined up, and the clerk and recorders are also coming in to support their election administrators who are appointed.
Chantel, are you carrying both flags in that committee?
Regina's going to do Maker, and I'm going to do MACo just so that we have numbers. Yeah. Questions?
So I have a hearing at 1:30-ish. It's upon adjournment of the Senate, so I'm going to be ducking out relatively soon. Jason, before we get into question and answers, I do want to celebrate the HB 104 Revised County Leasing Authority bill. That's a MACo bill. It was adopted by our membership. It was presented in committee on Tuesday. It passed executive action on Tuesday, and we expect that one to sail through.
He had to gloat because that's one of his.
Yeah, in committee and out committee the same day.
You can go now.
Any questions on other bills? I have one more that I'll bring up real quick, if not. All right, House Bill 169 had a hearing this morning. It's a bill that in essence takes Title II provisions on penalties for a public person to utilize public property personally. it was duplicative in our mind. So we were just going to stay out of it because we thought it did the same thing that Title II did. And we figured it would die probably just out of a result of that. We started hearing rumors that it had more ill-intended consequences than that related to our ability through the cooperative fire program to have folks be paid by DNRC and help fight our fires. We couldn't get confirmation of that. We did get confirmation that DNRC had some concerns last night. We planted some questions in the committee to try and ferret that out. Those questions in conjunction with the league's testimony on it being redundant hit their mark. And so even though we did not get up in that committee this morning, our follow-up immediately after the committee gives us more than a little strong indication that that bill will die. So those of you that are hearing from your rural fire folks about concerns about that bill, we are watching it very closely. We are working it. We just didn't get to the mic. But it, in my opinion, is it's dying, and it's going to die very soon. Senate Bill 48. Was that fuel tax?
Yeah, that's fuel tax.
It was tabled. It's dead.
It's dead?
Yeah, it was tabled.
Okay.
So for those of you that don't know, the bill was going to carve out a share of the fuel tax and issue it to tribal governments, which on its face seems fair, but tribal governments already get a share of the fuel tax. So this would be in addition to that. And, you know, the formulas are pretty solid in our mind. So giving them additional funds that, anyway, the bill died.
So Jason or Eric, this is Diane McLean again. I have a question back to the first bill, the 911 bill that Eric talked about. I was contacted by a dispatch, the head of a dispatch in a neighboring county with real concerns about this bill. And she referenced 2 bills. Is there another one that was proposed that is no longer going forward? Is this the only one taking money from 911 to go to Montana State Library at this time?
Ms. Chantel.
There's only the one bill that I know of that takes money from the 911 account and redirects it to the state library for 911. The other bill that she might be referring to was Senate Bill 81, which adds money to 911, but it originally had that decrease in the dollar. But now it'll just add extra money and help backfill the funds lost through the redirection of funds to the state library. I'm on it though. If I see anything for 911, I'm usually zipping right over there.
Okay, thank you, Chantel.
Yep.
This is Randy of Flathead County. I've got a question on Garner's bill, and I believe that's HB 50 on the 911. We already have a GIS program that we use, and many of the counties, larger counties, already do. This would decrease our funding from 911 for about 34,000, and I don't believe that Representative Garner, the sponsor, has fully taken into account the impacts across the state for the differences between the counties. I just like to make sure that we as MACo are carrying that banner, because we've got we don't need any more hits on the 911 account.
Commissioner Brodell, it's actually great that you brought this up, because I believe that Representative Skis is from your area and he has the bill right now in his committee. So if you could reach out to him, I've been sending him emails about amending the bill pretty consistently. But if you could reach out to him and give him your perspective, that would be great. That's what I've been trying to tell some PSAPs to do, because they're not hearing from PSAPs at all, and they need
Absolutely. And our director of our PSAP here has reached out to him. I haven't heard back on that communication. I will also reach out to Derek on and make sure he knows that we've got some concerns.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Chantel, this is Gary. You mentioned earlier that there's going to be an amendment to that bill that it would be the money would be taken out of the grant fund and not the joint fund. Is that correct?
Commissioner McDonald, I believe that is what the intent is. I have heard through members on the committee that Skis is going to bring an amendment to take it out fully from one or the other fund, the 25 cents or the 75. 75 being your distribution, 25 being the grant fund. In committee, he had talked about it coming out of the grant fund.
Right. Well, I can remember at our council meetings, I thought that was the original intent, was for that $450,000 or whatever it is to come out of the grant fund, the top of the grant fund.
No, I think that it was just misunderstood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I always figured that's what was going to come out of the grant fund and not the PSAPs.
Yeah, it's just, it comes right off the top.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This Randy getting up at the Flathead, just a confirmation on HB 127 by Carlson. That's the bill that would have allowed lesser payments on property taxes. I watched that hearing this morning, and it was killed and then tabled.
Good. I checked the site and it hadn't been updated yet, but everything we heard this morning was that it would be tabled.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you. All right, well, we are 5 minutes past the top of the hour. Anything last thing for the good of the order before we close? So we'll try and do another one in 2 weeks. So invitations will go out for looks like the 5th of February. No, yeah. All right, folks.
Hey, Jason, Roman here. I missed the front end of the meeting. Did you guys kind of summarize where we at with midwinter or other little tidbits for commissioners listening?
Well, we did not. I guess really quickly, we are looking at trying to do midwinter in person. We're trying to figure out catering. At this point, it doesn't look like we can do Helena based on the number of folks that they'll allow. So as of this moment, Butte looks like our best option, but we have some more details to work out. So stay tuned. But we are very hopeful that we can meet in person.
Okay, thanks. Same date, maybe Butte, huh?
Yeah, well, we might mess with the dates because we're depending on transmittal and some other things we may do into a weekend. So we got a little bit of moving parts, but it'll be generally around that same time frame, and we're working on it as quickly as we can. It's just hard to get straight answers at this particular moment. All right, folks, take care. Call us anytime if you have questions.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Thank you. Well, we got to go get a pickup.
Hi, I'm trying to reach Scott. This is George.